welcome back to another episode of the Queen of Pep Talks podcast. Happy Friday. I am so incredibly excited to share today's conversation with you that I had with Aislinn McKenna. She is an incredible mindset, content, strategy, reels coach who helps established business owners really improve their storytelling and their video content creation. She has been in the mastermind that I am in. We've been in there together for over a year. She is one of the people in there who I have really connected with and built a relationship. And when I say she is just one of the sweetest, most kind-hearted people you will ever meet, I literally mean that. She is like everyone's biggest hype girl. She is always there cheering you on. She is an incredible human. And we had a really beautiful conversation that I know you are going to love, especially if you are a coach, influencer, content creator, entrepreneur, and you're really looking to develop trust within yourself when it comes to your brand voice and feeling really authentic in the online space. If you're looking to really improve your thought process around content creation, find ways to make creating content more fun, more authentic for you, this conversation is one that you are going to want to listen to. I 10 out of 10 recommend going and connecting with Aislinn on Instagram. She is at Aislinn Coaching. I will put the handle to connect with her in the show notes of this episode. I hope that you enjoy this conversation. I know that you will have many, many takeaways. I'm really excited to continue bringing guests onto the podcast in 2023. I really want to be doing at least once a week an episode with either a client or a new guest who is coming on. I have a lot of incredible interviews lined up for wonderful guests that I'm going to be bringing on to the Queen of Pep Talks podcast. Everything else will remain the same for now. We'll see what unfolds in 2023. I hope that you enjoy this conversation. I hope that, as I said at the end of my conversation with Aislinn, don't just take the things that you learn inside of this conversation and just like, okay, cool, I learned it. If you want to really step up your content creation, and if you really want to feel better creating content and build a more powerful, binge-worthy personal brand, take some of the things that Aislinn teaches you how to do inside of this conversation and actually go implement them, okay? I love you guys so much. Enjoy the conversation, and I'll talk to you on the next episode of the Queen of Pep Talks podcast. See ya. What is up, you guys? I am so excited. As I mentioned when I prefaced this conversation, I have the beautiful Aislinn here, who is inside of a mastermind with me. We've been together in that mastermind for a year plus, a year and a couple of months. Yeah, I'm so excited.
Last October.
Yeah, a year and a couple of months. We're going to be finishing the year together in there. And she has come onto the Spark Mastermind as a guest expert, and we talked about content and reels over there. I'm really excited to bring her on the podcast today. And we're going to talk all things content, mindset, and how you can really step into standing out in the online space, whether you are a coach, an entrepreneur, a content creator, an influencer. It's kind of difficult to stand out in the online space. And a lot of us are overthinking, and we have a lot of limiting beliefs around content. So I'm very excited to share this conversation with you. Aislinn, do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself to my audience, share who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. I don't think I have the vocabulary to say how excited, honored, and grateful I am to be here with you today and have this conversation, and how I just know we're going to have such a beautiful talk today. It's going to be amazing.
It is.
So hi guys, my name is Aislinn. I was a luxury wedding photographer for 13 years, and I recently got into the coaching space over the past year, and I love helping established female wedding professionals as well as coaches really build these incredible brands that feel really good for them.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think one of the big pieces there is that it feels really good for them. And I think this is a really nice place to start. There is a lot of mimicking and copying in the online space. Mimicking, I'm comfortable with. I don't mind when people mimic content of mine or regurgitate even things that I have said, but I have had people take literally word for word things that I have said and turn it into their own post, like a copy and paste type job. So how do you encourage your clients and the women that you're working with to trust their voice and what it is that they want to say so that they can create content that does feel good for them, that is authentic to them and true to who they actually are? Because as we know, like copy and paste, it doesn't work. You might get a couple of likes on a post, but that's not you being authentic and building a brand that is true to you.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect place to start. So I think where a lot of coaches actually get stuck is that they're not making space in their life to actually listen to their own voice and their own thoughts.
Mm.
I think that it's really easy to get online and scroll and scroll and scroll and like maybe save somebody's post and be like, I'll just recreate this exact same thing later in the exact same words because obviously it worked for her. So it's going to work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what we're really doing here is taking away from the ability to sit with our own thoughts and really think about like, how was this my experience? Like, what was my experience with this particular topic, whether it's mindset, whether it's sales, whether it's business, whether it's boundaries, like whatever it is, what was my experience with this?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the best things that I like to tell my clients, like when we're first starting out and they're like, hey, like, should I copy this person or should I do this or whatever, is I'm asking them kind of more about like their daily habits. Like, where do your best thoughts come? Like, so for me, I love getting on the treadmill and just like thinking and listening to my favorite songs. And I have some of my best thoughts and my best pieces of content come out when I'm going for a walk or I'm on the treadmill, or sometimes it'll be like literally like I'll read 30 minutes before bed and it'll be like 10 minutes after I like put my book down and I'm about to go to sleep. I get like 7 different content ideas and I have to immediately go write them down somewhere. Otherwise they're gone. They're absolutely gone.
Yeah. Can we, there are so many things that I want to talk about that came up from this conversation. I hope I don't lose any of them. Number one is I agree that people are not taking the time and space to reflect within themselves of how a piece of content that inspired them is true to their own life. And I have amazing ideas when I'm walking on the treadmill, when I'm out on a walk, when I'm working out, when I'm in the shower, when I'm getting ready to fall asleep. And I'm very much like you, like, let's go write them down ASAP. How many though, can we be honest? How many of those ideas actually get executed into pieces of content and how many of them end up just stored in the notes on our phone? How do we create a connection between having a thought of like, oh, this is amazing, this is something that I want to talk about, and then taking the time to actually execute on that thought or idea and turning it into a piece of content? For you, does that have to look like it happens immediately, or do you trust yourself to actually go back and pick out the ideas that are like, oh, I do want to turn that into a piece of content?
So I think this comes with time. I think it really, really comes with time. When you are first starting out in the coaching industry, like you're first starting out, like you're probably going to have a million different ideas and you're like, I want to do all of them all at once. And it comes with trusting that when it's time for you to post that piece of content, that is the time to post it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the bigger piece to talk about with this is actually having a system around capturing those thoughts. So for me, I love creating a never-ending document, like a never-ending content document for both myself and my clients. So maybe if it was like with a client, like we're talking about like high ticket sales, like that's like a conversation we're having during one of our phone calls. I'm going to write some notes down of some thoughts that I have for pieces of content that goes into our never-ending content document. Mm-hmm. And then when we're having future conversations, I go back to that document and I refer to that document. I do the same exact thing for myself. Like I have notes in my phone that I like will write stuff down, but then at least on a weekly basis, when I am like in the creation mode of creating content, especially if I'm creating more than one piece at a time, I'll actually go into that document and I'll look through and I'll be like, ooh, that's a really good hook, or ooh, that's a really good thought, or yeah, maybe we want to tweak that and delete that because that's not a great thought.
Yeah. So you're taking the time later on to fully develop the thoughts that you feel are relevant for your audience and true to your brand and you authentically.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this also really helps with sometimes things will happen in the moment, like whether it's on a coaching call or with like mentors, or you see something and it like triggers you, or it brings up like something in you that feels like not great. And like a lot of times I see people, they will go make a piece of content when they're in that feeling of I'm triggered, or I'm not feeling good, or I'm like annoyed at whatever XYZ is. For me, I really like to create content from a place of empowerment and a place of calling my clients to somewhere higher, not agitating them or calling them out or shaming them. I want to come from a place of empowerment. So when I actually create the piece of content is just as important as what the content says.
Yeah, I love that. Like the mood and the energy that you're in when you're writing it, because that's going to be the tone in which you choose to write it in. And I think it depends on your personality. One thing that I am not very fond of, and I know we've talked about this in the mastermind, I am not a fan of like this mean girl era online where people are just like bullying and shaming one another about the way that they run their businesses. And even outside of the coaching industry, I'm sure that it happens, but it makes me really sad to see people writing content in a way that is so just like negative and putting people down. But also, can you speak to how that type of content is highly engaging, right? Like that type of content, that polarity is something that really engages people in your audience. And even if you end up on the explore page, because it gets people talking, and the more engagement we get on a post, the more opportunity there is for new people to see that piece of content. So how do you draw the line between like, oh, I want to be true to who I am and I want to be the nice person that I am, but also I kind of want to stand out. So maybe I'm supposed to say things that are a little bit edgy or a little bit like push people's buttons to get them to respond.
I think this was a thought that I had when I was looking at the questions that you sent over before our podcast. And one of the things you were asking about was like, how do we create binge-worthy content?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we watch our favorite TV shows?
Mm-hmm.
Why
like
do we
cringy and we're like, can't look away, train wrecks.
Yeah. Okay. So some of some of the pieces of content and some of the shows that we watch them because they're a train wreck. We watch them because we can't look away. We watch them because they're controversial. We watch them because they have very celebrity vibes.
Mm-hmm.
For some people's businesses, that is the way to go. That is the way to go.
How do you know if that's for you?
I
think especially when you're like, maybe feeling like you want to step into that, but there's that nervousness of like, oh, this is new and I don't know if this is right for me. How do you know if you're the type of brand or you're the type of business that is meant to have that type of content?
I think it's going to come from an internal conversation. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to come from sitting with yourself and asking yourself, is this piece of content empowering the person across the table from me? Mm-hmm. Like that ideal client that's sitting across the table from me. Is it shaming that person? Is it coming from a place of neutrality, or is it coming from a place of I'm annoyed that I see this and I want to be annoyed with the rest of the world and I want them to be annoyed with me? Or is it coming from a place of wanting people to move from a place of desire? So I think it really comes from like having that internal conversation of what is my actual intention behind this piece of content that I'm creating?
Yeah, I love that. Checking your intentions. I think that's something that's so important to do in our content and beyond, is like checking our intentions of the conversations that we're having and the mood that we're in and what we're saying and how we're moving, especially in the online space, because it does impact and can really impact the people who are watching. So we want to make sure, and that's a way for me to always feel good about my content, is even if I say something that might trigger someone or upset them or put them into a negative headspace, I don't feel bad about it because I know my intention behind it was pure and it wasn't to make them feel that way. But we can't always control the way that people respond to what we're putting out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this kind of comes back to when we see people copying other coaches and copying the exact wordings. Something that's going to land for Jessica's audience might never land for my audience. So that's why I really don't love seeing so many people copying other people word for word, because words have so much power. So just a tiny tweak in just one word on a piece of content can completely change the meaning, and it can also completely change the intention. So I think not to overthink your content, but also just to check in with yourself of what is my actual intention behind this piece of content?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important. Also, I think a big piece of the copying in the online space can come from, at least in my experience, when I've had people copy things of mine, I think it comes down to a lack of trust within themselves, especially if they're new to being a content creator, because there are so many well-known content creators, so many well-known quote unquote experts in their field. It feels like, oh, that's working for them. I don't know that I trust my voice yet because I don't have evidence that people care about what I have to say, right? Like my trust in my voice now is very different than it was 10 years ago when I started my Instagram account, because I now have evidence that people give a shit about what I have to say. So I trust that I can say what I want to say and people are going to like it. And if they don't, that's fine. But in the beginning, people don't have that trust within themselves because they're lacking evidence that people actually care about what they have to say. So how do they find that trust and deepen that belief that what they have to say is valuable, instead of just trying to regurgitate what popular people in their niche or in their industry are saying?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really great conversation to have, because I think even if you are 2 years into coaching or 3 years into coaching, you can still struggle with this.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. So when it comes to trusting your own voice, I think a lot of the mistakes I see in the online space is that people will try to cover like 18 different topics. So like in 1 week, they'll be like, okay, I'm going to talk about sales today. And then I'm going to talk about client retention tomorrow. And then I'm going to talk about mindset. And then I'm going to talk about body image. And then I'm going to talk about habits. And it's like, when we are kind of jumping from topic to topic to topic, there is no room for mastery in that. So if you are still learning to trust your voice, I think it's really easy to be like, okay, I'm going to talk about all these different topics, like 8,000 different topics that I want to talk about. What I encourage you to do is to master one. Talk about one topic, even if it's just for like a week or 2 weeks or a month. Talk about one topic and talk about it in different aspects, like come at it from different angles, and watch how you start to trust yourself as an expert in that one topic. Don't pick a topic that you don't know anything about. Like pick a topic that you already know at least a little bit about, because what I've recognized is that the types of conversations that I was having 2 years ago, the types of conversations I was having 5 years ago, if I looked at myself in my 2022 form and what the kind of conversations she's having, I am an expert now in 2022 in things I was not an expert in a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yep.
So trusting that you can already be an expert where you are right now. You don't have to be, 10 years in order to feel like an expert.
Yeah, so many things coming up for me in this conversation, trusting that no matter where you are in your own personal journey of creating growth and change in your life, the information and value that you hold within you is important for someone who is steps behind you. And there's always going to be, I think we get stuck in this trap of looking at everybody who is steps ahead of us, but we often fail to turn around and look behind at all the people who are like, have no idea how to get where we are right now. And it's like, no matter where you are, even if there are millions of people ahead of you, there's value in your experience in getting to where you are right now. And there are millions and millions of people who have no idea how to make that happen for themselves. So it's like, you don't have to be where someone who is ahead of you is in order to be successful and see value in your own words and thoughts.
Yeah. And I think one of the reframes and affirmations that I would offer to anyone who is feeling like I'm not an expert or the market's too saturated or I have no idea what I'm doing is, what I'm doing here matters. What I am saying here matters, because I think there's often voices in our head saying like, oh, this doesn't matter. This doesn't matter. What I am doing here matters. I was a wedding photographer for 13 years. And when I made the shift in my mind, like when I would show up on a wedding day and I would say to myself, what I am doing here matters, the interactions I would have would be so much deeper. The conversations I would have would be just so much more fulfilling. The day would go so much smoother because I showed up with this mentality of what I'm doing here matters. Even if it's just being a kind face for someone, or even if it's just being a kind word for someone, that matters.
Yeah, I love that. And that's actually an affirmation and mantra that I use a lot in my life when I'm creating content, because personally for me, it's helped me detach from any outcome that I'm expecting when putting a piece of content out. And I think it's easy for all of us to feel like, oh, this piece of content is so good. It's amazing. It's going to perform so well. And then the engagement that we get on it is like laughable. It's like, what? But if I can always come back to like, I wanted to say this for me. There was value in saying it for me. Like this matters for me. And I'm going to say it whether you like it or not, whether 10,000 people like it or not. It helps me detach from any expectation of how that piece of content is going to perform. And it really allows me to know, like, I'm saying this because I want to say it, not because I expect that people are going to like it, save it, share it, or engage with it. Right.
Yeah. And I think of course, we're going to hear people in the content world talking about like, yeah, you want shareable content or relatable content and like savable content. And it's like, yes, all of that is true. But also you want content that you can stand behind. And when you come at it from the perspective of what I'm doing here matters, that intention is going to be like so potent within whatever words or reel that you're creating. People are going to be able to feel that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just so easy to, of course, our content is in service of other people, especially when we're coaches. But at the same time, if we're constantly only thinking about how are people going to respond to this, we lose like the authenticity within ourselves because we're just trying to please people through what we're saying. We're not saying it because we want to say it. We're saying it because we think it's what they're going to like. And that's a dangerous place to put yourself in.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I just had one of my Reels advisor, which is my content strategy private coaching. One of my Reels advisor clients was just asking like, how do I create content that like my audience sees me as an authority in? And my question wasn't like, well, what do they already see you as an authority in? My question was, what do you see yourself as an authority in?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you right now? Like, what are the things that you could write a 45-minute lecture on, like without any notes or anything extra?
Yep.
And so when we come at it from that perspective of who, like, I am an expert because I am an expert, not because other people outside of me are saying I'm an expert, just the tone that we get to come from with our content completely changes.
Yeah, it's the confidence and belief within yourself that it has to be number one. And I think that for a lot of people who are new to creating content, it's very hard to see that and feel that, because going into some of the mindset stuff, so many people are wrapped up in only feeling good about themselves when they have external validation and needing other people to say like, oh, you're so good at that, or oh, you're an expert, or oh, you're amazing, you know so much about this. It's like, no, you have to trust yourself and build that confidence within yourself, because if you're like shutting down every time you go to write a piece of content and you're not saying things the way that you want to say them, or sharing the things that you really want to share, you're not building that confidence within yourself. And without that, they're not going to be attracted to your content or you as a coach, because they're not going to believe that you even believe in yourself. How can I believe in you if you don't believe in yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny because right now in 2022, I have both wedding professionals who are like working with me around mindset and revenue streams. And then I also have coaches who are like multi-six, seven-figure business owners who I'm helping with their content strategy and storytelling and reels. And when I first started out with reels in 2021, it was like, I think the spring of 2021, I did a 30 reels in 30 days challenge. And I remember not doing it for the likes, the shares, the saves. I was doing it because I was like, A, I want to challenge myself. B, I think this would be a shit ton of fun. Like, I just think it'd be so fun. And what I learned from that was how to show up on camera in a way that felt really fun for me and felt really good for me. I wasn't like, how do I master reels so I can get more clients? I was like, I want to do something that is going to push my limits and make it like a ton of fun for myself and just see what happens.
Yeah.
And so, not that I'm saying you have to do a 30 reels in 30 days challenge in order to get good at reels. What I'm saying is check your intentions. Are you doing this for outside validation? Are you doing this so that people will tell you like you're good at reels? Are you doing this to get more clients? Or are you doing this for the fun of it, for the journey of it?
Yeah, I think that's a really great thing to dig into if we can. How do you make content fun? How do you find joy in the content creation process? Because I think for so many people, it's like just checking a box of like what I'm supposed to do in my business. I'm supposed to post content. Sure, yeah, you need to post content if you want to build a brand online. But at the same time, it should be something that you enjoy and aren't dreading every single day, because the only way that we stay consistent with doing things is if we actually enjoy doing them. So do you have any tips or guidance on how my listeners can find a way to make content creation fun?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, if a reel doesn't make me laugh or feel like, oof, that was spicy, like, or it doesn't make me feel like sentimental, it's not my brand feeling. So if I'm trying to create from this place of how do I get my clients to feel a certain way, that's not being true to what my brand and my personal brand like stands for and what I want like myself to feel around my brand. So one of the first things I do with my Reels Advisor clients is we talk about like, what do you want your brand to feel like? Do you want it to feel empowering? Do you want it to feel spicy? Do you want it to feel funny? Do you want it to feel like girl next door? Do you want it to feel like powerful CEO? Like, what are the feelings you want? Let's create content that feels like that. So for me, I mean, like, you know me, like I have a pretty wicked sense of humor. And so like, I want people to know me before I walk into the room. And if I kept that wicked sense of humor out of my content, people would never know that in close proximity containers. So like for you, I always feel like you're such a warm, like hug of a person. Like that's just, if I met you in person, I'd be like, let's go get brunch and talk about the weather and how beautiful it is outside and talk about like, Love is Blind and like all these different things. Like, let's just have like a beautiful time together. Your content feels like that. So when I'm in close proximity with you, I feel that. So when we talk about creating content that feels really easy to create, I think the first thing like we need to kind of look at is, what do you want to feel in your business? Not what do you want people to feel? What do you want to feel in your business? And so anytime I make a reel and it's funny, I'm like, yep, that's mine. That's me right there. Like that's definitely my brand. People are going to know that that's me.
Yeah, it's so interesting for me. It's very important for me because I do in-person things and just in general, it's important for me to remain authentic. I always am curious, like when you meet me in real life or when you know me in this kind of the way that you know me, do I feel like the same person that writes the content versus who you know in that space? And 10 out of 10 times I hear like, yes, absolutely. But it's interesting for me because there is with certainty a side of me that social media does not see. Like if you knew me in my real life, like in my relationship with my husband and in my relationship with some of my friends, I'm very sarcastic. I make a lot of jokes. Like I pick on people like in a funny type of way. Like that's just the type of person that I am. And I have even had trouble connecting with how do I create content that allows me to share that side of who I am because it doesn't necessarily feel authentic to what I'm trying to portray in my messaging and in my brand and in my business. So do you ever find that there is a disconnect for people where it's like, this is a part of me, but not necessarily a part of me that deserves to be a part of my brand?
Well, I think I would ask you, why do you not think it deserves to be part of your brand?
I think because I personally find it difficult. I'm not attracted to creating types of content like that. Like I'm not like, oh, I don't really want to do the jokey reels. They don't really feel fun for me to do that. Maybe how I am like in my personal life, but it doesn't feel fun for me to create that. And I'm very much like you. If it doesn't feel good for me, I'm not doing it just because I don't want to and I don't have to. I can find a piece of content that is going to feel really good for me. But it's been interesting for me because I know that that part of me exists that's like jokey and a little bit more spicy, but I have held myself back from sharing that because it doesn't feel exciting to share. It's kind of like, I don't know if you ever feel this, but I think a lot of content creators might like, there are parts of me that I just want to keep to myself.
Yeah. I think this gets to be a personal choice for everyone. I really do. And I also think that if you had said like, I don't really share the, like sarcastic side of me, but I'm kind of interested in doing that. That's a very different
Yeah.
energy behind it of kind of curiosity than it is just kind of like, I don't think that's aligned.
Yeah.
I think there's
Definitely.
also places that you can share that aren't necessarily like in your social media. So
Yes,
maybe
with
you
my
have that.
clients, 100%. Like in Voxer with my mastermind clients, with my private clients, they get to see all of who I am. And I think maybe it's a line that I didn't even realize I was drawing of like reserving all of who I am for those people who come close and like really want all of who I am. And I think even more on my podcast, I feel like I'm a little bit more like jokey and sarcastic here than I am even in my content because I feel more connected here on the podcast. I feel more comfortable. This really feels like a home for me in my business.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a great place to talk about safe spaces. So, like when we think about our different places that we share who we are, whether that's your podcast, whether that's IG stories, IG live, Instagram, like feed post, reels, we have to figure out where does it feel safe to share different pieces of us and then ask ourselves and get really curious, like, hey, like I haven't always shared that I'm super sarcastic in my reels. Is that something I'm interested in? And like really sitting with yourself and not like immediately shutting it down or immediately going for it, but sitting with yourself and like kind of like seeing like what feels lighter. Like if I did do that, would that feel fun and curious
Yeah.
and exciting? Or would that feel kind of like you're almost like putting on a performance and you're
Yeah.
trying to people please? And if it feels heavy, like people pleasing and performance, maybe it's not aligned. Maybe that's not the place for you. But if it feels curious and interesting, maybe it's something to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Can we talk about, since you brought up, all of the different platforms where we create content? I think the focus for a lot of people is social media, which is incredible. It's a great way for people to find you and become connected to you. I also personally think, and I really encourage my clients when they're at a place where it's doable, you shouldn't just have social media, right? You should definitely have other places that you're connecting with people that are places that are yours, that they can't just disappear any given second. Is there a right or wrong time in terms of when someone who is like new to creating content, they're on Instagram, maybe they've mastered Instagram. It's always a mastery, right? Like we're always learning and growing, but they feel super comfortable on Instagram. Like they're good posting there regularly. They show up on their stories. They're nurturing their audience. They're growing. When is the right time to step out and find the next platform where they get to share and create content? Because every platform is so incredibly different. Like the podcast is a completely different world than Instagram, how you create content for a podcast. When is the right time for someone to make that decision?
I think this is like an energy capacity question.
Mhm.
So I really think that like just because you're at the point where you're able to post on Instagram and maybe you have TikTok too, like, and maybe you have Facebook. So like maybe you've mastered those three. You're able to post regularly. You have like good engagement with your audience. You feel really good there. Asking yourself, do I have the capacity to, dive into podcasting, which is a much more intimate type of connection space? And it's like, it's funny because it's both intimate and more like available in some ways.
Yeah.
So like asking yourself, like, do I have the capacity for that? Do I actually have the time, energy, and the ability to be like consistent with it?
Mhm.
I don't think that there's like a like when you hit 5 years and 1 month, like that's the time to do it. Like I think it's more of a like asking yourself, do I have the capacity for this?
Mhm.
And recognizing that there's going to be different mediums that are going to be higher capacity and like higher energy. They're going to require more energy.
Yeah, they have a higher demand in terms of what they take from you.
Mhm.
And I love that you said that because when I started my podcast, I had been on Instagram for, I don't know, 6 years at the time. And I was like, "Ooh, I know I'm ready for a podcast." Like I just felt that is the platform that I'm meant to do next. And there was a lot of like doubt within myself of, can I be consistent doing both? Like, can I be on Instagram and create one podcast episode a week? And in the beginning, one podcast episode a week was sometimes actually quite hard. It was like, I might go 2 weeks without doing a podcast episode. And I allowed myself no pressure of being perfect and like giving myself permission to say, like, I really want this podcast. Maybe I've had clients who start podcasts and they start with one episode a month because it feels like that's what they have the capacity to do. It's like, that's what I have the time for, the energy for, the bandwidth to do, given the demand that it takes. And then you get to build from there. Back on day one of the podcast, there's no way in hell I could do 5 episodes a week. And now it's like somehow I'm just cranking them out like it's not a big deal because I feel so comfortable on this platform. It's the easiest place for me to show up. I'm so excited to show up here. It's like it just feels effortless. And that's where we want to get with our content, where it's like it just feels like a part of who you are and your life. And it feels exciting to share and you want to share. And I wish that every content creator, no matter what platform they were on, could feel that, because that's the way that content creation is supposed to feel. And I hate that people are like pulling their teeth out, feeling like creating content is the worst thing in the world. They dread it every single day and they're doing it just to check a box because they think it's what they have to do in their business. Give yourself permission to like build that capacity, but also, much like you were saying, you have to find a way to make it exciting and fun for you.
Yeah. And I think this also speaks to mastery. Like, so I was a wedding photographer for 13 years. There are things that I did on my 13th year of wedding photography that would have felt at year one like an absolute, like, never, ever, ever.
Yeah.
I never would have had the capacity for that. But year 13, everything feels kind of more effortless at that point because you have mastered different pieces. So when I talked about, picking one topic and mastering that one topic and only talking about that one topic, it's not because I want to cage you into a box and say, this is the only thing you can ever talk about. What I'm trying to teach you is the skill of repetition and dedication and grit. Well, that's more than one skill, but like trying to teach you what mastery actually takes. It takes being okay with it being boring for a little while so
Mm-hmm.
that at some point you can add to your capacity and do other things and try other things. But when we are like, oh, I need to master TikTok and I need to master Instagram stories and I need to master Facebook and I need to master a podcast and I need to master in-person events.
Fast path to burnout. Like I'm gonna give up on this.
Yeah, exactly. And like sometimes like we think that, oh, my coach is so many years ahead of me. She's doing it, so I have to do it.
I'm so
And
glad you said this. This is exactly what I was going to bring up next.
yes, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I know I have to remind my clients very often, and I even have to remind myself very often watching Stephanie. Like I just wrote like a note this morning for a post that I'm going to post today. I had a 24K cash weekend, so excited about it. And then I see Steph 144K cash weekend, and I'm like, wah, wah, wah. Like, where, you know what I mean? Like in comparison, but we have to remind ourselves, just because our coach is doing something doesn't mean that we're meant to do it now or we're meant to do it ever. And that gets to be okay. And I know that I am a coach who coaches on a lot of different things, and my clients, they want to do the same. And I'm like, yes, you can, but one first, please become consistent with doing this one thing, get well known for doing this one thing. You can, at some point in time, when you're 5 years into building content and being a coach, sure, then you can talk about anything that you want because you have the reputation, you have the trust, you are a leader, people see you as an authority. but it's very different where I am versus where you are. And it's like, we have to give ourselves that permission to say, just because my coach is doing this right now doesn't mean it's the right time for me to do it, not just in content, but in everything they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Steph was actually one of my Reels Advisor clients last year, and it was amazing to work with her. And I think this is a really cool thing to talk about. She was at a point where she had mastered Instagram. Like, she's already a master of Instagram, but what she had not mastered was storytelling in the format of Reels. So what I did with her during those 3 months is we worked on the one skill set that she needed in order to, now she makes like 30 TikToks in a day and posts them over the course of a month. So I think it's also important to recognize that there's going to be a season of your business, and it might not be right now at the very beginning. There's going to be a season where you can hire people to teach you that one skill that you might be like, I want to master this, but I don't know how to do it on my own.
Yeah. This also brings me to, there was something else that I wanted to talk about in this, like becoming well known for one thing. I see a lot of people struggle with the idea of being repetitious, of saying the same thing differently, saying the same thing with a little bit of a twist. It's like, well, people already heard that from me. Well, people already heard that from me. And I want to drill home the fact, like the only way that you become known for something is that being the thing that you talk about all the time. The only way you become an expert is by studying and talking about that one thing all of the time. We have to give ourselves that permission, but people feel like they're like a never-ending cycle, repeating the same thing over and over, and they don't want to do it. How do we make creating content around the same topic, or maybe the same one or two topics, how do we make that fun? How do we switch it up so it's like, I don't feel like I'm constantly talking about the same thing, but I am kind of talking about the same thing?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize and trust not only your journey in business, but your client's journey before they hire you and after they hire you. Because if I like, let's just take the topic of business mindset. So I'm going to give you guys 5 hooks that you can use right now if you want to, like maybe change a couple of the words that you can use that
please,
are around.
Please change a couple of the words, please.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you.
So what I'm trying to get at is like, this is one topic, but 5 different ways to talk about this one topic. I trust that if I post this today, if I post one of these today, that a client who just found me on Instagram is going to see it and they're going to resonate with it. At the same time, I have another client over here who's worked with me for like a year and a half. They're going to see it and they're going to resonate with it. And trusting that just because you've talked about it in the past, this client over here who has like heard you talk about it before, they're going to see it and resonate with it where they are in their journey. Just like the client who just found you is going to see it and resonate with it where they are in your journey.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and give you those 5 hooks.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the first one, and this is the topic, is business mindset. My client came to me struggling with confidence around sales calls, and here's the exact strategy we implemented to get her results. You'll never believe where she is now. So if you have a client who has struggled with confidence around XYZ, or she, he, whatever, you can tell people exactly the strategy you implemented to get results with them. So that's the first hook that you guys can use. The next one is 5 mindset shifts you need to make right now to book your next client. These are the exact same topics. We're talking about the same thing. We're talking about sales calls and business mindset. So the third one is what I wish someone had told me about running a successful online coaching business. Same topic. You can talk about sales calls in this one right here. The next one is what you need to know about hiring a mindset coach. So this one's a little bit different. Like if you wanted to put business coach, you could put that. And the final one is how I went from a 9-to-5 job to being my own boss in less than a year. So I think it's really easy to look at these topics and be like, yeah, those are all different topics. But in reality, they are under one umbrella of business mindset.
Yeah. And a lot of the things that you may say in those posts will overlap. But like you said, it's going to land differently for the person who is seeing it. I also think it's important to note here, not every person in your audience sees every piece of content that you put out. Sometimes I think we're so obsessed with our businesses and we're like, I see it. I know it's there. So everyone has seen it. Well, no, everyone hasn't seen it. A very small percentage of your audience is actually seeing every single post that you're putting out. But also, how many times have you and I heard Steph say the same exact thing? And we're just like, oh, that was so good. And it's like, we've heard her say it a million times, but it hits different when you're in a different place. Maybe you need it in that exact moment. Maybe you just went through something where it's like, gosh, thank you for that. I really needed that today. It's like, we tend to think that, oh, we hear something once and we've embodied it and we've mastered it and we're like a living, breathing, walking embodiment of it. when we're not. People need to hear the same things over and over and over again in order to actually understand them, implement, and become like a walking, breathing embodiment of that. Just because you said it once doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve saying again. I say the same things all of the time. And yet my clients and my audience and my listeners, they're still always blown away because you needed to hear it maybe just a little bit differently on a different day at a different time. And then it was perfect for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like trusting not only that like what you're saying matters, because we talked about that earlier, but also that it matters to the person across the table. Yeah. Wherever they are in their journey, it's going to matter to them. And if it doesn't matter, that gets to be okay too.
Absolutely. So I'd love to wrap this up with talking about binge-worthy content, because I think that's something that my audience is really going to love. I would love to hear you talk about, and we kind of started touching on it a little bit, but I would love to talk about like why binge-worthy content matters and how people who are listening right now, maybe they have a brand and they're a content creator, how can they decide, is my content actually binge-worthy? And if that answer is no, how can they shift and pivot into creating content that does feel really binge-worthy for people finding them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I tell my Reels Advisor clients, and Reels Advisor is like my strategy and like video content creation, private coaching. I tell them that my goal with them in Reels Advisor is to help them create binge-worthy portfolios of video content that your audience is like obsessed with and can't stop watching. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to note that my audience is going to be very different than a client's audience. It's going to be very different from Jessica's audience. Whoever is listening to this right now, my binge-worthy is probably going to look different than your binge-worthy, but it is important that it is binge-worthy for you and binge-worthy for your audience. So like, for example, like we talked about Love is Blind earlier. If I make a Love is Blind reference when I'm telling a story to my audience, they're going to be like, what is she talking about? She doesn't watch that kind of stuff. That's not her like type of show. But if I were to start like making a reference to like sentimental like things and like how like I've kept this piece of paper that has like my vision on it from 2019 and like
that's definitely Aislinn.
That's much more exactly. But that's the thing, is that my stuff is binge worthy because you know my brand feelings.
Yeah.
Because I share them so often. So when I think about binge worthy content, obviously this is going to be different for everyone, but there's a couple of things that I feel like are good indicators that it's binge worthy. So the number one thing I think is good storytelling. Mm-hmm. People who have binge worthy content are good storytellers. They're not just like leaving you hanging or like, whenever I see a piece of content that's like, are you struggling with this? And then they don't give you a fix. It's like, it feels like you're just like poking and agitating without actually like giving like a solution or giving like a like Band-Aid to the problem or whatever. So another piece that I think is really important with binge-worthy content is powerful language. So I'll give you guys an example of a call to action that isn't super powerful and potent. And this is not going to like move your audience or get them to keep watching or keep scrolling within your actual portfolio. So the call to action would be, if you're ready to take control of your mindset and create the life of your dreams, DM me saying mindset and we can chat. So that is a really good call to action that I would consider really good binge-worthy types of call to action, versus what I see a lot is, if you're struggling with your mindset, I can help.
Mm-hmm. We got to let people know what they can expect to feel once they send that DM. Like, we have to ignite that emotion. And I think a lot of people are missing that in their content, of getting people to actually feel something. Sure, I know I'm struggling with my mindset, but what in the world are you going to help me do once I send you that DM?
Yeah. What's it going to feel like? Like, and it's also important too, to like think about like, has my audience ever felt this emotion before? Or have they ever let themselves be in an environment where it feels like this?
Yeah.
So when it comes to binge-worthy content, especially with video, I think body language and movement is a thing that I see missing a lot within like people making video content, like Reels or TikToks or even like Instagram, like stories, or I'm like trying to think of any other video content. I think that's like the kind of big ones, is that people's body language doesn't really make you want to like keep watching. Yeah. My goal with my Reels Advisor clients is that somebody lands on your page. They found you however they found you. They go to your Reels tab and they like click on one reel and they're like, oh, this is good. And they scroll. Yeah. And then they watch the next one. They're like, oh man, this hits home. And they scroll. Mm-hmm. And they watch the next one and they're like, oh my God, she's so funny. She gets me. And they keep scrolling. Yeah. You want them to stay not only like on your page, but in your universe. Mm-hmm. So body language being, I think it's really interesting when I see a reel and people are like, you guys can't physically see me right now, but people like lean back like very, very far back versus leaning forward. That's a very different type of body language indicator that's subconscious that you can make this change right now. When you're making your next reel and you're doing like a talking reel where you talk to the camera, I want you to lean forward just slightly, because what you're doing is you're inviting the person across the table from you to have a conversation with you.
Yeah. And it also feels like you're so much more confident in what you're about to say, because you're like, hi, I'm here, instead of being like hiding away from what it is you want to say.
Yeah. Another thing I see people do with video content, especially, that I feel like is a hallmark of binge-worthy content, the good creators know that you have to have movement within the first 1 to 2 seconds of the actual thing, whether you're talking to the camera or it's like, a funny reel or whatever it is. You want to have some movement as you're actually coming into it, because it just grabs the eye and attention so much quicker. And I think the final thing around binge-worthy content that like is a good hallmark of binge-worthy content is being relatable and showing that you're human.
Yeah.
Steph our coach Stephanie did a really beautiful, I believe it was a reel a couple months ago, where she was talking about self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And when she did that, and it's so funny because I had brought up the topic in our mastermind, and then she created like a piece of content around that exact topic. And it was really cool to see her take on it. But what it did was it humanized her and showed that she is a person too, to her audience. So I think sometimes we don't want to get vulnerable in our content. And I'm not saying every single piece of content has to be vulnerable, but be willing to talk about the things that maybe aren't always comfortable to talk about in your content.
Yeah, absolutely. Two things that you brought up in talking about binge-worthy content that I think are really important. The first being that vulnerability piece, and people feeling like if I show this kind of human side of me, I'm somehow marking myself as no longer being an authority and no longer being a leader. And people have a lot of fear around sharing the kind of like raw, real human moments, because they think people will no longer respect them. When I have always believed quite the opposite. I believe that number one, I want my clients and my audience to see me as humans, because I don't want them to hire me and think that I'm some kind of robot who always feels fantastic, because I don't. Like, I have feelings and I'm a human too, just like you. But also, I believe that people want to hire people who they feel like what they've done is achievable. And if we pretend that we're perfect in our content and that we never struggle and we never have hard days and we never have bad moments, people aren't going to see you as someone who are like, oh, I can achieve that, because they know it's impossible for them. It's not possible for you. And you're pretending as if life is perfect and everything is fine, when it doesn't mean, like you said, that you have to show up crying like I do. I'm happy to do that, but it's because it feels good for me. It's like you have to define what that line of vulnerability looks like for you and what you're willing to share. But I think that showing people that you're a human is so incredibly important.
Yeah. And I think it's also, oh, sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I think it's also kind of to touch on like when you are feeling like, oh man, I'm a human right now and I am having some big emotions, but crap, I really have to post something today. I really want you to have this like safety net of content that you've already created, so that on those days where all you can do is show up as like a slide of text and you can't show up to show your face, you have something to fall back on. So for me, when I'm creating content, and this is something I work with my clients on too, if you have the energy to do it, create a couple extra pieces of content. Like I have like, I think 14 reels in my drafts right now that I will probably use for the rest of the year, on the days that I'm just like, nope, I am not going to show up today and show my face today.
Yeah.
So I do agree. Like we need to have that vulnerability and the humanness of it, but also there are going to be days that you're not going to feel like a creator and you're not going to feel like I want to create today. Those are the days to fall back on the content that you already have.
Yeah, absolutely. But that requires thinking and planning ahead, which most people are not doing with content. The other thing that you brought up that I just want to touch on before we wrap up, because I think it's really important. You said it like bugs you when you see posts that are like, this is how you're feeling, but they give you no solution. I think a lot of people fear giving solutions in their content because they think, well, then why will people pay me, right? Like how much teaching, I know you listen to the podcast, how much do you actually learn on the podcast? A lot. I give everything for free, like literally everything other than one-on-one conversations with me. I give so much for free, and I have no fear that if I teach you how to do something on the podcast or on Instagram, then you're not going to hire me. I think that the more value we give, the more people will respect us, learn from us, and want to hire us. But I think a lot of people are still living with this fear of, if I provide solutions in my free content, people are never going to pay me. Do you see that as a kind of theme with people who you work with where there's some fear around giving too much for free because then they think people won't hire them?
So I would say with my Reels advisor clients and the ones who are coaches, I don't actually typically see that as a mindset thing that they have to work through, because most of them are already like 5, 6, 7 figure entrepreneurs. Like they've been giving free content for quite a while. So they don't necessarily see it as like, I can't give more free content. I think what I see more is like, how do I share to somebody who's an expert versus somebody who's a beginner? Because there is learning differences between somebody who's learning something for the first time and somebody who's already embodied it, but they need extra embodiment pieces. So I think like when it comes to our content, we also need to be looking at like, who are we talking to? Like I talk to established business owners. So if I'm out here like, giving super, super basic stuff, I also need to be giving stuff to the expert who has already embodied this, but they want to go from good to great.
Yeah. So not every content is going to speak to the same type of person, and that gets to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think that's a really beautiful thing. Like we were talking earlier about pick one topic and like talk about it for a month and just master that one topic. If you like, let's just say this month you decided to pick the topic of sales calls and that's what you wanted to talk about. Next month, you can talk about it from one level up from where you talked about it in this month. Like when you talked about it this time, because the people who have been like looking at your content, like reading your content, they may be at that beginner level of I've never done a sales call before, or they may be at the like I've done dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And I just want these slight tweaks. And I think it's really beautiful that like it just gets to keep growing and evolving over time, even if it's the same topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think no matter what you're teaching on, there are people at different levels. They're the beginner, the intermediate, and the advanced people. It's like, oh, I already know all of that, but there's still something to be said, or oh, I know none of that, and there's something to be said to that person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's always tweaks that we can be making as we are mastering things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this conversation. I feel like I could talk about a million more things with you because it's just content is such an important part of many of us, our business models and the way that we're growing on social media. And that's how people are coming into our worlds. And I just think it's so important that people learn how to have fun with their content, create content that feels so authentic for them, but is also going to be valuable for all of the people in their audience, no matter what level they're at in terms of the connection and the things that they're craving to learn from the person who they're watching.
Yeah. And I think just bringing it right back home to what you're doing here matters. It's not just, I'm going to post a post today and hope that I get some likes on it. You are not only sharing your story, but your clients' like different stories. And like, it really does matter if you come at it from that intention of what I'm doing here matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any tips? I think this would be a good way to wrap up. Do you have any tips for deepening that belief within yourself of what you're doing matters? If you ever get in your head of like, is this valuable? Or, oh, there's already 10,000 people saying this. Should I even bother saying it? How do we deepen that belief within ourselves so we do feel the confidence of like, yeah, it matters that I'm going to say it. It matters that I'm going to say it this way. So I'm going to go ahead and say it.
Yeah, I think it has to come from finding evidence in your life that what you are doing matters and like picking out what that means to you. So like when I say like what I'm doing here matters, it comes from if I can make myself feel just slightly better today, that matters.
Yeah.
If that happens to trickle onto the people that I'm talking to today, and like, one smile from me has them having a slightly better day, that matters because the ripple effect down the road is really like what makes the world a more positive place and a more impactful place.
Yeah.
So when it comes to deepening it within ourselves, I think it comes from looking for evidence in our own life that we are making an impact and that we are making a difference in people's lives and not just people's lives, but our own life.
Yeah.
Are we making differences in our own life? Yes or no? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. There is no. Yes, you are making a difference in your own life.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say is even if you don't feel like you have the evidence of people outside of you where your work has impacted them, you are where you are because of the work that you've done on yourself and look at where you've led yourself to. And if that's not evidence enough that what you have to say is valuable, then I don't know what is going to be.
Yeah, go write it down. Like write down like at the top of a sheet of paper, like what I'm doing here matters and here's why. And like just write down whatever comes to mind for you and just like look at that piece of paper every once in a while and be like, yep.
Yeah, I love that so much. Thank you for sharing this conversation with me. Why don't you tell people where they can connect with you, where they can find you if they desire to? And I 10 out of 10 recommend, because Aislinn is just, you said I'm like a warm hug. You're literally the nicest human that I have ever met in my entire life. You are the most supporting, kind, loving, generous person. And I highly recommend everyone here connects with you. So how can they do that?
I appreciate you so much. I love those words. So you guys can find me on Instagram. That's mainly where I live. It's under Aislinn Eileen Coaching. You can also find me on TikTok. I'm not on there nearly as regularly, but I do have different ways that you can work with me if you're a coach and you're looking for somebody to help you find your voice within video content and how to make content actually really fun. I have Reels Advisor. I also have a couple programs around that as well. But I'm just so excited that we got to have this conversation, and that I really hope that the listeners are able to take away really good little pieces and just go make those shifts immediately.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. And I think that's a really beautiful message to send you guys off with is don't just listen to this. If you're a content creator and you feel like I need to step my content up, or I want to find a way to make this fun for me, or I want to find a way to trust myself more and be more authentic to who I am and really connect with the people that I want to connect with, go make a move right now that's going to allow you to anchor that in for yourself. Go do something today that is going to help you say, okay, this isn't just something I want, it's something that I'm doing, because that's where the change happens. It's not just in the information, it's in the implementation.
Yeah, you already are an expert. You don't have to do anything different to stand out. You are already doing something that matters. Come at it with that energy and just watch the world change around you.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I will put all the ways that you can connect with Aislinn in the show notes of this episode. If you guys love today's episode, it would mean so much if you share it on social media. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review on the Queen of Pep Talks podcast. You already know the deal. It means the world to me. I love you guys so much, and I will talk to you on the next episode. See ya.